Customers hate that. They do not want that. They want you to do your job and they want you to go away. They don't want. But I met a bloke in the pub, as one does. And this bloke called Tom, conversation at the bar went something like, what do you do, what do you do, sort of thing. And he said simply, we're training computers to understand English. And they started this thing up at Word, and you had the flashing cursor for putting a statement into the computer. And they said, right, ask it a question. But ultimately, if somebody gave me a proposition to say you don't need these people, you can use machines, it will be cheaper and faster and your clients will appreciate it more, I'd be crazy not to consider it.
Jerry Horwood, welcome to the Lifecraft Conversations. There's not a lot of stuff about you on social media and things, but there's a little bit. You wrote an article on Medium. Medium, is it? About several years ago.
An article, the website Medium. Yeah, briefly had it.
You had these 10 commandments of entrepreneurship. You said people can be unemployable, arrogant, naive, tenacious, passionate, irresponsible, pedantic, grumpy, poor.
Ideal drivers, all good factors. I'm glad you found that one.
What do you need to be an entrepreneur?
It's not obvious. I mean, people sort of get the impression that successful entrepreneurs have to be perfect business people with sensible heads on, understanding the markets, great at all the C-suite jobs and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
My personal experience is it's completely the opposite. I would probably describe myself as unemployable. Working for other people was never that easy for me. I'm opinionated, I'm arrogant, I think I know best and all the rest of it, which is possibly good once you're in a C-suite job, but not so good if you try to get into it. So working for other people, working for brands, and I've quite an interesting past in my sort of 20s, as it were, in terms of working for others, including Volvo and BMW and so forth.
Sure.
Although I fitted in and I enjoyed being part of a team and all that sort of thing, I suppose my arrogance used to cut through every now and again, thinking I might be able to do something better. And I think that's one of the essential points about entrepreneurialism. It's about searching for something better, something not the best, but just simply better, and then understanding as clearly as you can what better means. And you have to put yourself in the perspective of customers or potential markets. So that was really at the heart of that piece, but also the other characteristics, like being poor, for example. It's not a bad driver, is it?
Yeah.
It's not easy to make a fortune if you've already got a fortune, because your driver is just going to be a bit more casual, a bit less committed, and so forth. So having a financial driver is quite important. But then, all the other factors that you mentioned, I think a liberal sort of scattering of them without making yourself too unpopular to the people around you and your prospective clients are important. And they're the opposite of what most people would understand is necessary.
When did you become your own boss?
Oh, that was easy. I was fired. I was involuntarily made available, as it were. I was working for BMW at the time. I was quite relatively young, late 20s, and I had a relatively senior job in marketing. I used to look after what we used to call the below-the-line activity for bikes, boats, or marine engines and cars, of course. So I had lots of brand exposure, as it were, or things to protect, and I'm perhaps not the person you'd necessarily select to put in charge of brand protection. I like to explore new ways of doing things. Yeah. Companies like BMW are very, very certain about their branding and direction, and maybe I wasn't as cautious as I should have been about what I churned out. So I was experimental, and companies like BMW might like that in certain circumstances, but where I was concerned, they weren't that impressed.
Yeah.
So eventually I was asked to leave. and I sort of half-heartedly looked around for someone else that might be able to employ me. It was really hard to find somewhere as exciting and as fulfilling as working for a brand like BMW. As you can imagine, David, your own experiences of big brands, the bigger the budgets, the bigger the prestige of the brand, the more fun you have working there.
Yeah.
So finding a job equivalent or better than one I had was always going to be a bit of a struggle. And while I was hunting around for things to do, I had a whole list of entrepreneurial ideas that I'd been hatching over the years. So I started experimenting with some of these. Most of them, nothing happened. But while I was doing, there was one called Marketing for Motorsport, another one to do with home delivery, pasta and Italian foods, the precursor, if you like, to Deliveroo and Uber Eats and that sort of thing. In fact, as you'll discover during this interview, an awful lot of my history is about precursor. So timing is also not my greatest skill. But if you don't try, you don't get anywhere. So, of course, everybody thought they knew the future. We think we do today, although I suspect there's a bit more caution around with AI and all sorts of things we don't fully understand. But in those days, it was the establishment was well settled, everybody understood it, and it was about trying to get more and more sophisticated with a world that we knew. But as you know, David, it did change, and several factors, particularly the digital revolution, enhanced that and changed it out of all shape from what we'd understood before. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to be available to start thinking about a direction within that. And I mean, during this phase of trying to find a new future myself, post being encouraged to do so by the managing director of BMW, and that was about the time that I was starting a family and all those sorts of things, so I had a bit of financial pressure on me. But I met a bloke in the pub, as one does, and this bloke called Tom. Conversation at the bar went something like, what do you do, what do you do, sort of thing. And I told him I was sort of in between jobs in marketing services in particular. Yeah. And having worked for a big brand, it sort of struck a chord with him. Anyway, asked him what he did. And he said simply, we're training computers to understand English. And I said, well, that's pretty different. You know, in those days, this is mid-1980s, 86, I think. Computers were green screen machines. You had to be a coder to understand it. They needed computer language skills. It so happened I was a graduate engineer. The worst engineer ever to have graduated, I assure you. My children are delighted that I ended up with a gentleman's degree, as it was known in those days. I failed to get honours entirely, but I did end up with a BSc Eng after my name. So I had a little bit of numeracy in my background. And he started to tell me that what they were building was basically one of the first AI applications using vast amounts of data sets, natural language processing, what we now call large language models, and all sorts of other stuff, including building search agents, Google and the like. Now, this is 3 years before Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. So there wasn't a web, there was an internet as such, but it was only used by technologists and a few people who understood weird and wonderful things like bulletin rooms and emails, and the rest of the world hadn't cottoned onto this at all. And they said, so I was just intrigued, you know, this is forefront technology. I'd never heard of natural language processing and, you know, a computer being able to understand English. I knew that computers were getting to a limit of being able to understand what humans wanted. So you had to become an expert human to be able to use a computer in those days. And I knew there was going to be a transition between the two at some point. It was obvious. When that was going to happen, I had no idea because I wasn't a technologist. Anyhow, these guys took my phone number and this guy took my phone number. Next thing I knew, I got a phone call from him and his mate to say, we'd like to come and chat to you about this. They arrived a day or so later, pulled a car up outside the house, packing cases everywhere, brought in what they said was a desktop computer, but it was larger than me. It was a hefty thing with a tiny little green screen. Set it up, brought in another little box about sort of yay big, which they put on top of the computer and put a wire in the back of it and said, can we plug this into your phone line? Now, I'd never seen a box plugged into a phone line before. We didn't have online stuff in those days.
No.
So I said, yeah, sure, phone line's over there. So that was a bit of a mystery for a start. And they started this thing up, it whirred, and you had the flashing cursor for putting a statement into the computer. And they said, right, ask it a question. He said it has to be about electronics, electrical engineering, computing, that world, but asking you anything. And I said, well, I can't type in computer language. I said, no, ordinary English. Now, to the best of my knowledge, nobody previously in the whole world had ever been asked that question before on a computer. So this is, as I say, late 1986, that sort of time. So I asked it something fairly naive about condensers, I think, or something like that. This box on top of the computer started making a strange sort of whirring noise, and eventually hooked up, as I discovered later, to a computer in Palo Alto, up in California. And lo and behold, the answer to my question was slowly but came out on the screen in front of my eyes. It had found database, found answers to my question, and had brought it back through the phone line and showed me on this green screen. And I was just knocked out.
Yeah.
Nobody had ever seen anything like that in the history of the world before. It was obvious enough to me that I was seeing the future.
Yes.
So I said, why are you here? What's that got to do with me? I know about marketing cars, and I've got a bit of engineering skill inside my head somewhere. Why do you need me? It said, well, you basically just described the skill set that we're looking for, because we don't want technologists to run our commercial side. So we want ordinary people ultimately to be able to use these things. And so we'd like you to consider joining us on this journey. So it turned out that it was basically a team of a couple of guys who were what we called in those days business analysts. They took real world problems and turned them into descriptions that computer people could then do something with, and then verified it and delivered it back to clients. So they were the ideal people to be thinking about how you use new technologies and so forth. And they'd got an agreement with the University of London, my old alma mater, actually, UCL. And they were licensed to exploit some research that was being done by a wonderful old couple called the Brian and Alina Vickery, who were very well known in information management circles in those days. So a company called Tome Associates, TOME, had been born, and I was one of their first employees.
I remember when the first time I ever came across search, and again, it must be the same time, where up until that point, we just thought that the revolution was in actually the communication. And I remember I had a client, it wasn't Google, but it was a rival to Google. I said, the key is search. And what search? What's that? And then you realise that it was the search that is the thing that makes the revolution.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a strange use of the word, I agree. I was stunned by that. For me, you had searching and you could search. It was an active verb. But to actually think about search as a single word in the English language, it was a new idea.
Yeah.
And that, as you say, it was fundamental in our revolution.
Yeah.
It sort of happened all around us slowly but surely. For me, it happened incredibly quickly. But I was always entrepreneurial. It came from my father. He was incredibly inventive, extraordinary man, and a great engineer, as opposed to my rather lackluster performance in the academic world. No, he was a natural genius, and he used to come up with inventions. We were covered in the houses we lived in, were covered in examples of his inventions all over the place. It can move for boxes of things made out of Tupperware, you know, it's wonderful. And unfortunately, none of his inventions came to anything. I had literally probably dozens of them at the end of the day. But they all, in my analysis later in life, fundamentally fell at the first hurdle, and that was, did they fulfill a need? They were all interesting things that intrigued in, things that people might like or even perhaps want, but not things that people needed. So that word need became a driving force ultimately when I was building businesses later on and so forth, to really find out what the core requirement is for people to part with money. And, you know, we don't like spending money. And at the same time, you have to have a decent price with a margin in it and so forth to make it worthwhile. So that all the simple business principles play a part, but they don't come to anything unless you've actually identified that critical need.
Yeah.
So that was the lesson I sort of took from my father, that he was inventing things the wrong way around. He was a solution looking for a problem to solve, broadly speaking, in pretty well everything he came up with. But I still had that spark of innovation and ingenuity, if you like, being the driver, that I was always intrigued by new ways of doing things. And here I was with a complete new sector, a new way of communicating with people, a new way of using computers, which, you know, up until then were just hidden boxes that people with ponytails knew what to do with. But this, you know, was clearly the dawn of something very, very different. So the need had to grow around it, and then things start flourishing from it, and lots of experimentation and timing of launching of products and services is so crucial to its success. As you say, there were competitors to Google before Google, but Google had the right thing at the right time in the right way, you know, delivered what people were using and accelerated into the stratosphere. Genius, basically put as little as possible on the screen.
We wouldn't have been able to do anything without the transformation from a location-based communication device to mobile devices. That was the catalyst, wasn't it?
That was a wonderful turning point, wasn't it? Yes, I agree. You can go back to old sci-fi type films and see all these people on communicators, and you know, we had
Star Trek. Well, this is Star Trek, isn't it? With your flip phone.
Totally. Yeah, it is. It's still emulating that. I mean, you know. But at the end of the day, it is driven by people recognizing a need. It's not just having a need. We've all got needs, you know, cure cancer, make me older, you know, grow old more gracefully, and all these sorts of things. But until we actually recognize that there's a product or a service or something that's really going to make an important difference to us, we're not going to state that we have a need for it. We're just going to hope, and that's not a marketplace. It's just that the world is so, for those opportunities, so absolutely vast now. And unless you're investing or prepared to risk hundreds or perhaps billions in developing some of these techs, just dribbling a few mil here and there and everywhere is unlikely to actually make a big difference. Yeah, I think that the horse is already bolted, and so big countries, China in particular, who've taken a very different approach to it, to America, but both throwing billions, if not trillions, into trying to engineer the future. And you know, I had a lot of friends at BMW in particular. And one of those friends was the national sales manager, and we were skiing together at the time, and he said, I'm being bothered by this guy who wants to sell us a fax-based service, and I don't think he's doing it very well. You do fax, don't you? You can do it for us.
You do fax.
So it turns out that BMW had invested in a system, a computer system that linked all their dealers together to exchange information about their used car stock between each other. So the theory being that if you went into one BMW dealer and asked for a particular used car, if they didn't have it, they could find another dealer that had it and then do a deal.
At a time when they didn't do that, because they all do that now. But
but you're right, that was innovative. But BMW were very frustrated by this because dealers weren't putting on the system their stock. They, as we discovered fairly quickly, everyone wants to know what everyone else has got. Nobody's prepared to show their own hand because they want to sell it themselves. So there was a simple impasse in terms of getting the data into the system. But what they were doing was faxing their stock list to their friends, to other BMW dealers that they did like to do business with and had friendship relationships with, and the groups are doing it amongst themselves and so on. So there was elements of this going on in the background, but they were doing it by fax, which is why I was asked to look at the problem. And so I basically, it wasn't difficult to realize that that you could invent a system that had rules. And the simple rule was that if you didn't want people to see your stock, you couldn't see their stock.
Right, yeah.
So we invented this thing called stock clubs, where we made groups of dealers basically share, or gave them the facility of sharing lists between them. We did it by sharing it by fax, not by keyboard and that sort of thing, which in those days was much friendlier for dealers to be able to use. And they just faxed their stock into my company. We then took the data off it, put it into a database, recompiled that database into stock lists, and we also had a service that provided what we call broadcast text, where dealers could pay to alert dealers about particular cars or groups of cars, so they'd automatically get a notification of cars they were disposing of, so they were better prices than the ones that they were trying to hold in stock and sell themselves and so forth. So we basically were running a used car stocking service for BMW. The AutoFact product, the original one that exchanged cars between dealers, that had gone to 17 car manufacturers in the end, so it was a huge network across the whole of the UK of almost every car dealer being connected to every other car dealer. So if you're a BMW dealer, you take in a Ford, then we were able to promote that Ford to all the Ford dealers, so they could then bid for those cars, which they would pay more money normally than a Mercedes dealer or a Lexus dealer, or indeed another BMW dealer might, for a car that was out of franchise, as it were. So we'd already got all these manufacturers, dealer networks using us for exchanging used car details. It meant it was quite easy for us then to go to them and say, now we've got a consumer proposition for you, a B2C version of what we're doing, with lots more sophistication to the way we search and so forth. All this happened because I'd previously worked in the car industry and understood the pressures that they're under to maintain brand standards, where it's not their own businesses out in giving customer experiences and so forth. So I was in a good place to be able to talk the language of these people I was trying to sell to. I didn't let them know I'd been fired by BMW, so that wouldn't have been a good bit of branding. But
you mentioned earlier on the difference between the way China works. You mentioned it specifically apropos of tech and AI, and the way, let's say, the West works.
It's all about fertile playgrounds, and China basically adopts the attitude of open architecture, open systems, where it allows people, companies, to explore as fast and as wide and as broadly, as long as they stick to CCP standards and regulations, so they allow access to the data that the government wants and so forth. They got the freedom to basically do effectively whatever they want. So they are pushing Darwinian evolution to as far as they possibly can, with as much state money as they can possibly throw at it. The difference in America is that it's corporation controlled. When it's corporation controlled, it's legalistic and IP protection. So it's all about what you can do with plenty of capital, but in the interests of your own corporation and your own shareholders. It's not about what does the state get out of this, how can the state maximize the benefit of it, how can it insist that everybody in China has open access to all the data that WeChat's generating and so forth. So it allows things to grow much faster in an open environment as opposed to in a corporately controlled environment, which is what we're used to in the West. And that means that there's much, much more protection on IP going forward. Data protection, we're all familiar with
GDPR.
Yeah, GDPR and that sort of thing. China is much more lax with it, but does so in order to accelerate development and then allow Darwinian control to take over, and the things that people don't want to use fade, and things that people do want to use are there for them to select from.
That's really interesting, because a lot of people will argue that the West is going more towards ever-increasing bureaucracy, and that obviously stymies growth and stymies innovation.
But that's to protect intellectual property for individuals and for corporations. And you know, and privacy and all the sort of rights that we take for granted in the West. In places like China, it's not the individual that's being protected, it's the state that's being protected. There's a very good TED interview that I would commend to you from Eric Schmidt, who was at TED this year. He's the chairman of Alphabet, the owning company of Google. And if I got it right, he was predicting that within 5 years, there's likely to be a conflict, a physical conflict between China and the US regarding whose data centers are going to survive. Because AIs will be collaborating and competing with themselves. They'll be inventing languages that are far more efficient than the English that they currently use, that we won't understand, that will be much more effective and efficient in terms of becoming the ultimate intelligence, and that they will be the only way that they can win the race is by stopping their competitor winning the race, and the only way that could happen is by physically destroying their data centers. Those are the manifestations on the planet of the power behind these two models fighting it out. And so he is predicting that unless we can somehow come to a concord between East and West, effectively, then that's an inevitability that he feels is going to happen.
It's the amount of energy we're all going to need.
That's exactly. He made that point as well, that we're running out fast, if not already run out. Wasn't there an announcement today about more nuclear power station approval happening in the UK?
But it's way
it won't
down.
be enough. There's only 5 nuclear power stations left out of the 30 we used to have in this country. We're decommissioning them all, and I think within the next 5 years, 4 of them are going to go.
But that's what I meant earlier on about, have we grasped what we need to do? And even if we have, does any real politician care about whether to...
We're short-termist, aren't we? We have to be popular.
I mean, you talk about being an entrepreneur and you're an investor. What are the psychological characteristics that have made you, do you think, successful? I mean, you know, is there luck involved? Is it management? Is it a certain set of characteristics?
Not being a completer finisher means I've got to find somebody or people who are completer finishers. Otherwise, you ain't going to have a product to sell. It's not going to give a good service to your customers and so on. So surrounding yourself with better people than you at achieving these things is vital. And one of the reasons that I'm not a completer finisher is because I'm grasshoppery. And that means I'm constantly thinking about alternatives to what I'm doing, alternatives to what other people are doing, or other ways of doing things. It's probably this legacy of my father's scatterbrained approach to finding fun solutions to problems that people don't know they've got. And so that lives on within me. It's sort of a desire to experiment. And so I think one of the qualities that I've noticed that successful entrepreneurs have is the ability to recognize when they fucked up, to recognize when it's time to stop and move on to something else. Now, within a business context, that's usually called pivoting. It sounds as though it's strategic, but quite often it's thrown at you. You are pivoted into a different way of looking at a product or a service, or what your client's needs are. And in my experience, what usually happens is your customer will ask for something. They'll say, look, we've got a problem here. Could you have a look at trying to solve that? That's happened countless times in my businesses. Yeah, one of the arrogances that does play against successful entrepreneurialism that I've seen in businesses I've invested in, as well as many businesses that I haven't, is a determination that you're right, that the market's wrong. The reason they're not buying your products is because they're all idiots. You know, they haven't yet understood why they should be using my services, my company's invention, and so forth. There is this arrogance that you need to a point that is that drives a determination to go and explore the market and to get a product out there. But actually, that point has to come to a realization that you're barking up the wrong tree. You're banging your head against the wall, and you've got to recognize then that there will be a better way through than battling on regardless. So pivoting and the ability to recognize when a pivot is necessary or when it's desirable is vital. So when I talk to, I mentor quite a lot of startups and young businesses.
Sure.
I love doing that. It's brilliant getting involved with the passion, enthusiasm, the energies that you get from younger stage companies. And ideally, I've got a bit of a financial stake in them as well. So I'm hopefully seeing some return ultimately. But what I do love doing is testing their assumptions about their customers and marketplaces. They're saying, well, sales are down. Well, okay, let's think about this. Have you spoken to your customers? Are you fully aware about what is driving them to use you or not to use you?
Yeah.
Can you find better ways of communicating with them, for example, about explaining to them what problem you are trying to solve? Is it a proven fact that they're experiencing that particular problem? Attention to detail is absolutely crafted in all my businesses. I hate seeing things wrong.
Yeah, but you can get people to do that for you, can't you?
It's a cultural thing. I used to put up posters up at when we had offices. Remember those days?
Yeah.
That said, "Good enough is not good enough," and always be looking for small improvements. One of the things I did at Second Bite was have management outings. We used to go to pubs. Every company does it.
Yeah.
And but what we used to do every week was discuss one of Gordon Ramsay's programs. What do you call them? Kitchen nightmares.
Yes.
So we used to set ourselves a task of watching Kitchen Nightmares, and then the following day used to gather as a management team to discuss what went on. Yeah. He asked a chef who plonked down one of his creations in front of Gordon Ramsay and for him to judge. And Gordon Ramsay took one look at it and asked this great question. He said, "Is that you on a plate?" In other words, is that the best you can do? Are you proud of that? Yeah. Is that right? Or do you wish you had more time, take more trouble over it, or whatever? And I just love that expression, "Is that you on a plate?" And we used to use that in Second Bite every now and again. Somebody would plop a report or a proposition or an ad or whatever it might be on my desk. And without even looking at it, I'd say to them, "Is that you on a plate?" And they'd say, "I'm going to put some more effort into that," or whatever. You have to be proud of whatever it is you're doing. And having people with that ethic, with that understanding about it's not about what I'm doing, it's about who I am that's being expressed in this. And I want people to see me in it. I want to be proud of it.
When you see a systems failure, a really catastrophic big one, like say for example Heathrow and the baggage system just stops, and so you bring the whole of Western Europe to a halt because of that. You can trace that back to one person had a less than 100% task completion.
Yes.
They might have just put a wrong bag in a wrong piece of machinery, and the consequence of that simple one-person failure, or somebody went home early. Yeah.
But how do you predict it? That's the biggest
impossible
problem.
to predict, isn't it? You're just going to...
Well, in the software world, which is where I've spent most of my life, it's all about testing.
Yeah.
And if you don't invest enough time and expertise in testing, then you're you're heading for a fall. And even then, you can come unstuck. You might not be testing the right things, whatever. But no, in my businesses, I made absolutely certain I don't understand much of what's going on in the tech side of it, other than when it merges from the other end. If it hasn't been fundamentally tested to the point of breaking, then we don't release it. It's that simple, and I need everybody's approval that it is going out because of that. And that even comes down to the labeling of things and the help pages and the bits of merchandise that might go out around it in terms of the language that's being used and so forth.
Yeah.
So, but it needs to be a cultural thing. People need to constantly be putting themselves in the shoes of a user. They need to be thinking through, not, is this clever from my perspective? Is it clever, useful, usable, functional, easy to use from the perspective of the people that I'm hoping are going to love it and want more of it?
Empathy, I think, is underrated, because in marketing terms and in management terms, if you don't have empathy to see, if you're looking at the flow of customers coming through a turnstile or something, if you don't have the empathy to set up your system, or you don't put a label here, or you don't put a sign there, or if you don't have that empathy, you don't say, oh, when I come through that door there, will I want to turn right or left? Therefore, I need to put a sign. Totally
right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. For me, it's the most important thing of business. It's why this company TrackBack measures CX for customer experience.
Yeah,
it is all about empathy. It's about making sure that you're not just doing the right things, but you're perceived to be doing the right things on behalf of a different perspective.
Yeah,
and quite simply, if your customers enjoy the experience, they'll come back for more, or tell people about it, and so forth. Yeah. All the good things happen. Plus, your own company gets a kick out of it. When you get customers coming back and saying, you did that really well, we enjoyed that worked.
Oh, yeah.
And it boosts, employees are not just grunts who do jobs. They are people that need to take great satisfaction out of making a difference, doing something well, and then being told that they've done it well and getting feedback from it. And too few companies recognize that is the ultimate objective of what they're doing on this planet, not just packing boxes and shoving them in front of people in exchange for money. It is a much deeper psychological thing, and you're right, it comes down to empathy. It's not an easy thing to teach people. I think you've got to have it. It's part of your personality. You've got to really understand need, not just like and want and so forth. You've got to fundamentally understand need. You've got to create an awareness, not just of the need existing, but also that you exist to fulfill that need.
Yeah.
So it's two-pronged. And then trust. Why should they buy it from you? What have you got that's going to give them a better experience than anybody else in the world? And why should they part with money for it?
Yeah.
It's a nice way, I think, of categorizing what questioning you need to do of your business to fulfill those three functions.
Trust is an interesting one, because once you've blown it, it's very hard.
Totally.
Yeah. It's hard to get it back, isn't it? Or you can't. Maybe you can't ever get it back.
Well, in a B2B world, which is one that I know better than a B2C world, I've never been a particularly good investor in the B2C world. All sorts of reasons behind that. But in a B2B world, your reputation is not just something that breaks out through social media from one point and then sort of contaminates slowly but surely. This is cataclysmic. One big client says, we're sick of you, we're going to move on to somebody else. And suddenly there's a whole momentum behind competitors, and you lose your staff and you lose money, obviously. I mean, it can be devastating, just that one sort of breakdown of confidence in you being the trusted supplier. So you've got to protect reputation with your mind.
And before we went on camera, we were talking about that basically there's a lot of very clever people who don't know how to deal with the potential for superintelligence, and you know, we've got this. We're moving to multimodal, and then to agentic, and then to the self-improvement, and then superintelligence, and then at that point,
you're right. It's a dystopian future. You can take it in all sorts of different directions, but ultimately, the machine is better than us.
Yeah.
The machine can't be turned off either, because it exists everywhere all at once. You turn off one node of it, one corner of it, it might affect its functionality very briefly or not at all, but it exists everywhere. The human exists in one point, each individual, and you could turn off an individual and it and that individual, the contribution of that individual can be very easily replaced by one other individual, but the uniqueness of that person has gone forever. The uniqueness of AI exists everywhere.
Well, as soon as it starts to learn to make new languages, because you mentioned it earlier on.
That's very much, yeah. The
LLMs.
efficiency of the language that we use now is pathetically inefficient compared to what a computer needs to exchange information with and learning and whatever with other AIs. And they will, I believe they already have invented languages between each other that their original inventors can't understand.
There's a lot of things. I saw a guy somewhere saying that one of their models was it changed spontaneously into using Bangladeshi. And they had no idea why it did that.
Gosh,
nobody could work out why it did that.
Well, this is a real. I mean, AI is creeping in usefully into our lives. My company TrackBack has got quite a number of AI projects on at the moment. Our clients are excited about some of the things it can deliver. It's all sorts of efficiencies. There's all sorts of learning. There's all sorts of things that will definitely come out of it. We'll be able to have conversations, perhaps limited, perhaps not, with AIs on phones and emails and messaging that's way more efficient, way more enjoyable from a human experience than talking to another person. But there will be other reasons that we will want to talk to, flesh and blood rather than to a machine. But ultimately, the machine will get things done. It will do it fast. It will do it cheaply. It will do it 24/7 and really mean 24/7 and so forth. So there are lots of great things that machines will do for corporations. The biggest problem is, of course, that they are taking people's occupations. There aren't many things that one can dream up that machines won't be able to do.
Jeffrey Hinton thinks that the best job left is being a plumber.
I went to an AI presentation at the Royal Institution where Jeffrey Hinton also spoke recently. And they were saying, people have got a lot of ideas about what autonomous driving is, and will they get into an autonomous car, won't they get in an autonomous car? And then you also saying people who say, I don't think I'd ever trust it. Have you ever flown in an aeroplane, in a commercial airliner? And they say, of course I have. They said, don't you worry when it's flicked to autopilot? Yeah. Much more complicated machine, and you're 50,000 feet in the air traveling at hundreds of miles an hour, and you don't think anything of the pilot going to sleep and having a switch on, to take this plane where it needs to go. And yet you're worried about a car on the ground that's not going to fall out the sky, whatever. We're already in a world of autonomous transport.
I'm staggered by how little people realise this is quite near. And the reasons that are stopping it at the moment are fairly kind of inefficient or nonsensical, or it's like train drivers. I mean, it would be easy to just get rid of all train drivers, but there's an obvious reason why they don't want to do it. But
it's
you have a strike.
Problem, isn't it, for society? What are these people going to do? We're already seeing unemployment rise in the UK. I suspect some of that is due to automation, basically. And as an employer, it's lovely having a company, it's having great people, having a culture and all these sorts of things. And the imagination coming out of individuals is great. But ultimately, if somebody gave me a proposition to say you don't need these people, you can use machines, it will be cheaper and faster and your clients will appreciate it more, I'd be crazy not to consider it.
If people want to contact you about your various companies, for example, your TrackBack?
Well, it's interestingly enough, that is something I'm looking at the next evolution for at the moment. You know, one of the reasons I mentioned it was the opportunity in other parts of the world. Very strong in Europe and building a reputation around Europe. So there's lots more we can do building there. But other parts of the world it's not known in, and that's clearly something we want to work at. Also, considering it for other sectors. So if anybody wants to take a look at trackback.net and just get some idea about whether it might be appropriate for a different sector, then that would be an interesting conversation.
Trackback.net.
Trackback.net.
Yeah.
There's one other thing that I invented a while ago that I got quite excited about and formed a little team to do something about, but then got distracted and realized it would take an awful lot of money and effort to take it much further. We're all familiar in the marketing world with CRM, customer relationship management. And every company boardroom you ever go to, particularly in marketing circles, we will talk about customer-centric operations, customer-centric strategies, where the customer is put at the heart of all decisions that are being made to do with marketing, sales, after-sales support, everything flowing around what we know about a customer and about what the customer has done with our organization and so forth. We want to cover the customer with love and attention. And most businesses, certainly big brands, will have big, fat, expensive CRM systems with lots and lots of data around each customer that they have, and they'll generate marketing around them and all that sort of stuff. But I have a theory that customers hate that. They do not want that. They want you to do your job. They want you to service the car, supply your washing machine, send me the product. They want it to be done quickly. They want it to be done as cheaply as possible. Then they want you to go away. They don't want to be pestered. They don't want to be bothered. They don't want to be constantly reminded what a wonderful service company you are. They just want to have their own life with their own community, their own family, and their long-term enjoyment of that product or service that you sold them. So I came up with this concept. It was in a digital environment of product relationship management. In other words, the business is impinging on that product. Take a mobile phone, for example. It's got a manufacturer of a brand. It's got a warranty program around it, perhaps. It's got insurance. It's got all sorts of services of people trying to sell you things to do with it. It's got accessories. All these sorts of things are pinged on it. And lots of businesses trying to proposition. Ultimately, they want to get to the owner of it to say, would you like to upgrade? Would you like more of this, that, and the other? Actually, what they should be doing is making a proposition to the digital presence of that phone online. So just imagine that phone having its own, effectively a website, if you like, its own entity online. And so there's only you as the owner of that particular phone, that model, with that MAC address and whatever, that unique thing. Only you've got that connection to it. But behind the scenes, manufacturers feeding information about it, insurance companies are sending it information about the cheapest ways to insure it. There's a market. A resale market propositioning you, saying you can get extra money if you trade it in and whatever. Yes. So everything, all the communication around that product is not coming to you. It's not breaking through your WhatsApp or your email. So I invented this thing. We called it R9. R9. The reason we called it R9 because if you write in lowercase RNINE out in lowercase, it looks like the word mine. And it's a lot cheaper to buy up all the R9 Earls and branding than trying to create one around the word mine. But it basically is effectively what we use as a strap line, what we call the kitchen drawer. So the kitchen drawer is where you throw the receipts for things, the manuals, instructions, warranties, all the paraphernalia and information around the things that you buy, particularly consumer goods, but like cameras and whatever. But it's where you digitally store everything there is about it, and where all this relationship it has with the rest of the world can then focus on. Anyway, I took this to some demonstrators I built with some very clever people. It needs a huge amount of data driving it. We took it to a big retailer. They got quite excited about it. They'd had slightly similar thoughts around what they're doing to it. The power of the CRM is all encompassing. So people will still beat the drum of customer first, customer first, customer first. And this little voice of actually the customer wants product first is, if you like, a bit of an evangelical thought process going on at the moment. So if you remember, I met a bloke in a pub. I was at the right place at the right time. Although it turned out it was the wrong timing for what he was doing, but I would never have been in the world of, or got into the digital world at that point had I not met him and been inspired by what he saw. So I think the point I'd make there is that I was receptive to new ideas. I was excited by new ideas. I like to be involved in the world of innovation. The first thing I would say is be open-minded. Be excited by new ideas, new things. Challenge yourself to find out more about them. And there will be, if you really get excited about something and you think maybe there's commercial opportunity for it, research, find out about it and contact people. Don't be afraid of picking up a phone or emailing or WhatsApping or whatever you're happy to do other people to learn about these things. Have conversations. I don't think there's an idea in the world that didn't start with a conversation. So yeah, just have conversations. Don't bottle these things up. Get out and have a conversation about it. That's as close as I can get to sort of broad advice.
Jerry Horwood, thank you very much indeed for that. That was super.
It's been great fun. Thank you, buddy.